recently at uh, what I recently presented in Discover in Las Vegas. So, as I mentioned, my name is Miguel Guerra. I'm a principal technical marketing engineer for the Solutions org. Um, my team, if I can get this slide to move forward. So, I'm part of a team of six that we were tasked with creating content for the VSG and for enabling our partners. And you can go directly to one of the to the migration, one of the most recent migration upgrade guides via this QR code. The agenda for today, I'll start off with a high level overview to give us all to start on the same to get us all to start on the same page. Next, I'll compare hierarchies. I'll work on mapping AOS8 hierarchy to AOS10. Do a discovery walkthrough with some tips that I've learned over the years as a delivery engineer. So one thing I didn't mention is that prior to joining Aruba 3 years ago, I was at an Aruba partner and I spent 11 years as a partner delivery engineer and then moved into pre-sales hybrid role with delivery. And before that, I was also a customer engineer. So I've been, I've played I've been, and prior to IT, I was, I was a user for a few years as well, right? So having that experience, I'm hoping to share that information with you to hopefully make your migration projects a little bit more, um, or a little bit less, stressful, right? So I've been there in the morning, right, on a Saturday morning trying to deploy this. So I'm hoping to share some of the tips, some of the things that help my job move along, that'll hopefully help you as well. I'll also cover this config discovery tool that we've created in-house and is now available to partners. So I'll provide a link to that as well. This one, it took a lot of the workflows that I did with as a delivery engineer on the discovery side, um, gathering all the AOS8 information and created a web tool that'll help get started, everything from parsing inventory information for your APs to be able to upload that into GLP, WLAN configuration, appliance configuration, and so on. So I'll walk through that as well. A big part of that will be me walking through it a little bit more in depth and then opening it up for questions and be able to explain to you what this tool can do for you and what it won't do for you. The ultimate goal for me is for you to walk away from this session more confident about migrating customers from AOS8 to AOS10. When I did my first 6 to 8 migration, whatever it was, 2017, 18, it was pretty stressful because we did not have a lot of examples to reference at the time. And this is where I'm trying to address that and hopefully provide all these new concepts on AOS 10 and Use Central uh, in a way that is relatable to an AOS 8 experienced engineer. So I'm going to start with the upgrade planning, just a quick overview. So these are things that are likely that you already know. So please bear with me. The idea here is to just get everybody on the same page because not everybody is an Aruba dedicated engineer, right? As a partner, you're going to be doing everything else. So you could be working on different projects for 3 months and all of a sudden you got to jump back in, or you've been working on a different project and now you want to do this. And I'm trying to get I don't want to go in here with assumptions. So I want to present this for everyone so we can get because everybody gets started on the same page, like I was saying. So here we have an example AOS8 controller-based deployment, right? Contains the campus AP, a mobility controller cluster, mobility conductor pair, and an Airwave server. Wi-Fi client traffic is encapsulated in a GRE tunnel between the AP and controller cluster And as traffic from the Wi-Fi endpoints reach the AP over its radio interface, it's encapsulated and forwarded to the mobility controller. The controller then inspects the traffic, assigns the user role, tags it, and forwards it onto a local interface to a trunk user VLAN. IPsec secures all control plane traffic exchanged between mobility conductor and the mobility controllers. Additionally, two management protocols are also used. PAPI between AP, mobility controller, and mobility conductor, and AMON. Oop, I jumped. Sorry. And AMON set for mobility controller and mobility conductor to airway. Let me minimize this other window here that was distracting me. So now we take a look at AOS10 tunnel mode, right, and compare it to AOS8. In this example, both platforms encapsulate Wi-Fi traffic between Wi-Fi client traffic between AOS8 controller and AOS10 gateway and their respective APs. But in AOS10, you can now configure to also encapsulate GRE with IPsec. And although AOS8 uses only GRE tunnels by default, AOS10 now offers IPsec over GRE so that you can encrypt both control and data traffic end to end if your deployment or security policies require it. Next, the mobility conductor and airwave appliances used by AOS8 are replaced by Central. And in turn, IPsec, AMON, and SNMP traffic between appliances is replaced by TCP 443 management traffic sent from APs and gateways to Central. I'll skip the browser demo for finish that in a little bit. So here's some key considerations for migration. Some of these are obvious, right? Gather your subscription and license information from your customer. Make sure the customer's HPE GreenLake account has been created. Verify the AP. The APs and controllers can all reach Central. This is especially for customers who have security policies in place preventing APs and controller appliances from reaching the internet. I've had several customers that required a jump box to be able to access all their switches and gate and controllers, making sure that the customers are aware that these devices now have to speak to Central, including the access points. To convert controller managed APs, the associated controllers should be running AOS 8.10.0.12, 8.12.0.1, or later before beginning an upgrade. These are specific features that you'll need that'll make it so you have a smoother migration. Number 5, make sure APs controller discovery is configured properly. Right? One example is if APs are configured with the static LMS IP, make sure that those are pointing that those LMS IP addresses that are set up are pointing to the VRRP address of the cluster, of the controller cluster in AOS 8, not to the individual controller. The risk for me, it's not absolutely necessary because you're obviously going to be in a change window. But again, some of these tips are not critical, but they will be super helpful. Just things that I over time started adding to my processes to help reduce these trips, these potholes that I would fall into, right? Going down. So one of these, like I was saying, the LMS IP address, as an example, if your LMS IP is of controller 1 and you move all of your APs to controller 2, you start upgrading controller 1, and in the middle of that upgrade, something happens where that causes the APs, because you're in a change window, anything, or whether a switch reboots or anything, and those APs happen to restart, those APs will end up looking for the first LMS IP, which is now no longer going to be accepting devices because it's in the process of upgrading to AOS 10. So that's just one example, and there are others, but again, just making sure that you check for that. Number 6, make sure that campus AP management interface and wireless tunnel mode clients are not placed on the same VLAN. If they do in AOS 8, make sure they're moved to a different VLAN during AOS 10 configuration. This one here, there's a lot more detail on this in the VSG, in the AOS 8 to 10 migration planning guide. There's a flow chart that we created to help you understand that. And that's mainly because uh, I thought that was really important to make sure that we emphasize this, just because Aruba has traditionally, when I first started doing Aruba uh, years ago, I remember hearing Aruba present the platform as to customers as, hey, you know what you can do? You can put everything on one VLAN, and our user roles will separate everything, right? They'll segment the traffic, and it's great. Customers did that, and it worked great. As I was doing deployments and migrations, one thing that when I saw this new consideration for AOS 10, the thing that got me was I started thinking about is some of these customers who have um, wireless clients on what they call a trusted VLAN, but that includes wired clients, includes wired devices like printers and APs. So if you have any customers that have that kind of scenario where the AP and the trusted client lands, that's a tunneled client, lands on the same VLAN, then you want to make sure that before moving to AOS 10, they're separate. Moving on to potential gotchas. Know the necessary VLAN considerations for tunnel mode deployments. If you plan to go from all tunneled SSIDs to, let's say you have a customer that now wants to explore bridge mode or mixed mode, make sure that the switch port interfaces, um, traditional campus mode AOS8 would be okay with running all access ports. So make sure that those ports are configured as trunk ports and allow for those VLANs that are going to be tagged if you're going to introduce bridged SSIDs or mixed mode SSIDs. IAS, make sure that if the customer uses it, it's rare, it's not often, but if the customer is using IAS, um, just make sure that they are aware that that is not supported in AOS 10. And make sure that your AOS 8 cluster is connected in L2 mode. So when you're starting to do this migration, if you are starting it with the workflow that I'm going to detail in a second here, where we're taking one controller first, converting it to to a mobility gateway, uh, by making sure that you have it in L2 cluster mode, your hitless failover will work almost flawlessly. That's one of my favorite things about AOS 8 and then now AOS 10 is the hitless failover capabilities. Again, more information is in the VSG. All right, comparing configuration model. When first released, AOS 8 became the new standard for controller-based Wi-Fi deployments, centralized on-prem management, multi-level hierarchical configurations, and one of the big things that I just mentioned is hitless failover, right, through controller clustering. The familiar diagram here, right, this is the way that it was presented to me when we were first learning about AOS 8. It reflects how we built scalable, repeatable deployments across global enterprises. Each folder level could push down config, global SSIDs, regional NTP servers, site-specific VLANs. All of that could be inherited from levels above or applied at specific level or a specific controller or at the site. This hierarchy gave us control and clarity, especially with features like profile reuse, automated firmware upgrades across multiple sites, etc. If you were part of the AOS 8 deployments, you know how powerful this model was and still is for on-prem deployments. Now let's look at how things have evolved in AOS 10 with HPE Aruba Networking Central. At first glance, you might think this example looks totally different. It did to me, but if you've worked with AOS 8, it's actually quite familiar. You'll see that we still have multi-level hierarchy, we still have centralized management and hitless failover. But now it's all managed in the cloud and expanded to include not just access points and controllers/gateways, but also switches. Instead of folders and MDs, we have scopes that include site collections, sites, device groups, and device level overrides. The configs can still be inherited top down. And in this bottom part here, you see your AP groups are grouped similar to AP groups. This is grouped not just by function, but also deployment context, like warehouse, outdoor, office, similar to the AP groups, like I was saying. Right? Each group will inherit core policies with the flexibility to override where needed. So while the structure may have changed labels, right, some of the names, and it's presented in a certain way, the principles behind it will are going to feel familiar once we're done with this presentation. Uh, I'll, it's still about scalable layer configuration, but with more flexibility, scalability, and built-in cloud benefits. Now let's walk through inheritance in the new hierarchy. On the left, we have part of the new central configuration UI showing the following. We have the library at the very top on the left, which stores reusable profiles. Think of this like when you go to edit in AOS8, if you go to edit the SSID profile to trim some data rates, as an example, and you scroll down to the bottom, you have the option to commit, or there's a button to the side of it that says commit as. You commit as, you can rename that profile, and then it'll create another profile for you to use in that area, right? So when you do something like that, typically that ends up in your profile list in AOS8, right? In the CLI, you'll find it in the profiles, but they'll be in different places. In AOS10, anytime you create a profile, as long as it's shared, ends up in the library. So if you create a profile in the Chicago site, for example, and you click it and say it's a shared profile, it will apply it to Chicago, and then it will show up in the library and list it as being part of the Chicago scope. You could, on the flip side, you can create it at the library level and then assign it to Chicago, and it does the same thing. So you have the flexibility to apply to create these either or. You can create them all in bulk ahead of time and then apply them to the sites that you want. It's a little bit different than in AOS8, but similar benefit. Next, the global scope is where we apply the settings that need to be consistent across the organization. Things like the global SSIDs that a company would use across the org, roles, VLAN names, etc. Basically anything that should be inherited by every site. The site collection scope is a logical grouping of multiple sites, such as offices, distribution centers, and retail stores in this example. This helps us apply common policies to a larger set of locations without duplicating work. And then under each site collection are individual sites which represent the actual geographic locations like Chicago, Manhattan, etc. Any configuration unique to a particular office or branch location, like VLAN IDs, local SSIDs, can be defined at that level. Then we have devices, which are the actual gateways, switches, and APs deployed at each site. Central sees each device, checks its say its role, and applies the relevant profiles from the hierarchy. If needed, we can customize device-specific settings such as uplink ports, SVIs, or anything specific to that device at this level. And finally, devices can be grouped logically, similar to the AOS8 AP groups, like I mentioned earlier. For example, in the Chicago site, we have APs grouped into 3 separate groups to allow for specialized configuration, like different RF settings or disabling and enabling specific SSIDs. Altogether, this hierarchy means that we can manage thousands of devices across multiple global regions and site types while still allowing enough flexibility to fine-tune per site or even per device if necessary. We go from very broad centralized definitions in global down to site-specific or device-specific overrides. This approach greatly simplifies day-to-day administration and maintains a consistent standard across the entire network. So now let's map some of this configuration from AOS8 to AOS10 in New Central. So this on the left should be a familiar image. This is an example of a global company that we use in the VSG. We named it Orange Widget Logistics, OWL for short. So on the top folder on the left, you'll see the MM hierarchy. We have OWL, an OWL folder created under the managed network. The next level down contains 4 global regions, then countries below that, then sites named for their respective cities, and managed devices under each of the sites. So a typical AOS8 uh, deployment hierarchy tree on the left. Now we'll use Chicago as an example site. This is some of the configuration.
Miguel,
Extract. Yes,
Miguel,
sir.
quick question. A question was asked, is it required to have the switches in Aruba Central for AOS 10 to work? And I would say the answer is no.
No, I mean they can work independently, but if you want to manage
Or
them,
independently. It just
yeah.
makes it easier to manage the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I have not, but my plan is to start trying this out as well, the hierarchy. But I knowing all the things that I was able to do for my customers with the AOS8 hierarchy and knowing that I could apply it now to switches, I mean, my brain is firing from all the times that I had to configure switches manually when I was in IT, right? All the notepad managing and all of that, thinking of how that can make it so much quicker, right? Applying TACACS configuration and things like that, that the benefit to me is huge. Um, but I have not myself tried it. One of the things that I pride myself is being, direct with the engineers. Is I'm not going to tell you that that this is great just because I read it somewhere. I'm telling you, my thoughts on this is that it'll be there's a lot of benefits to managing your switches this way.
Okay, good.
Thank you. All right, so saying that so this here, some of the configuration in the center here is example configuration. Just as an example, right, we would extract this from a show run output from a controller at a site. If we picked Chicago in this example to be the first site we're going to upgrade, um, we pull the configuration. We know that it has SSIDs, AP groups as listed here, right? So it has the Office AP group that broadcasts all 3 global SSIDs and has a high density RF configuration because this is, like I say, open floor concept, wireless first initiative, right? We have those customers with the really nice modern offices and they decided they don't want to run um, data drops to any desk. So they want to be all Wi-Fi. So in those scenarios, you would have a very specific RF configuration to make sure that is optimal for that area. Now, they also have, in this example, we have a warehouse AP group, which is going to have a much sparser configuration, right? APs are not going to be as dense. So RF is going to be a little bit different. And then in this example, they're broadcasting only 2 of the 3 SSIDs. And then the outdoor AP group, in this example, is broadcasting just a single SSID, the guest SSID. So the SSID and the 3 AP groups are inherited from the OWL group at the top level. The radius servers are inherited from the USA level. So we have East Coast and West Coast, and this one here is US Radius East. It's what's serving Chicago. If they were in California, it'd be serving be served by a US Radius West. And then the rest of the configuration was found to have been applied directly at the Chicago level. So how would it look if we tried mapping it to New Central? The SSID is configured at the OWL level. When you find SSIDs configured at the OWL level, in an example like this, in a scenario like this one, um, you would move it to the global level, or you would apply that configuration to the controller level. We can then create a site collection named USA for this example and configure the radius servers here. We can create a site named Chicago, place it under the site collections. We could assign it to be under site collection, under that USA site collection. And then you would apply the VLAN configuration, clock, PS, pre-shared key. If there's a pre-shared key override, for example, I've seen customers that have specific sites that has the same SSID, but for different reasons, they did an override on their pre-shared key. Whether they had a security issue and their data collection devices, they wanted to change, or they went with new ones and they wanted to change the SSID, and the pre-shared key was overwritten at that level, right? So you can do that at the site level here. And the AP groups, as I was mentioning, those can be configured. The configuration from those AP groups can be mapped to device groups that you would create and assign your APs to those device groups. And I'm going to show you a few ways of mapping it to hopefully drive that idea home. It took me a while to just the way that I'm a visual learner, so I have to get that picture in my head before I fully understand it. I can't just read a paragraph and grasp it. So and a lot of my peer engineers, over the years, were the same way. So this is where I'm hoping that this is repetitive to some of you, sorry, but to others, I think this is going to be very helpful. So this is another way to look at that scenario. We have the global scope. We create 4 site collections for each of the global regions in AOS8. We create the sites and move them to their corresponding site collections. Then each site will be assigned devices installed at their locations. Now, as for configuration and how it can be applied to Chicago, the SSIDs and other settings configured at the OWL node in AOS8 can be created at the global level. This will be inherited by the site collections and sites across the organization. Region-specific settings such as NTP, radius, etc., can be applied at the site collection level. Site-specific settings such as time zone, VLAN IDs, etc., can be applied at the site level. And finally, any device-specific settings such as hostname, uplink settings, etc., are configured at the individual device level. And as for AP groups, those can be configured as device groups, and the APs can be assigned to each group similar to an AP group in AOS8. Though one more thing in this scenario is that I decided to create site collections based on global regions, and I skipped the country node and created the sites. This was done because we cannot do it one-to-one mapping of the same number of levels in AOS8 as with AOS10. So the decision to carry over the regions versus the countries really depends on how the settings were distributed in the AOS8 environment. So what I'm talking about here is on the left. See, I crossed out the country level because in AOS10 and U Central, you can't map, you can't nest a site collection within a site collection. So you have these are your levels: global site collections and sites and then devices. Uh, Whereas in AOS8, you can create a folder within a folder within a folder, and then you end up going this a few levels. And again, this is one of the things that worried me as well, concerned me as well when I first learned about this new architecture. The first thing I thought about is my customers that had, a lot or like maxed out on all the levels. And as I started to go through these and compare and thinking about how I would present this type of information, how to map it, I realized that I was surprised to realize that to see that most of my customers that I had done this for, when I went back to, I'm a pack rat with data, so I have all these show commands from all these customers before I would finish a project, before I would leave a project. So I looked at the config hierarchy for a lot of these customers, and the majority of them do not have all of those levels. So when they do, you would want to have a conversation like that's what, but I used an example that had that many levels to explain why, what you would need to do, right? So in this example here, my thought is cross out, you could either cross out Americas or USA if we're talking about this level, right? Either cross out the global or the country level, but it really is going to depend on how the customer's configuration has been applied in the hierarchy. And this is going to vary from customer to customer. So you want to make sure that that you have a full understanding so you could have that conversation with the customer and then decide how you're going to split it. In this example, like I said, I just cut out the country node and then moved them. So then from there, all sites, all cities like Chicago, New York, um, Chicago, New York, Toronto, for example, will all be in Americas, right? We wouldn't have USA, Canada, and then split them. So just making sure that you grasp that. I hope that makes sense. And then we'll have a Q&A afterwards so we can talk more if you have questions about this. So now if we change this, I'm quickly changing it to, if you notice, look at the purple level with the site collections. Right. So here I have global regions. So I'm going to switch it to, this is an example enterprise customer. I'm going to switch it to an example retail customer where you have, instead of having global regions, now you have offices, distribution centers, retail stores. Right. It's a similar layout as before. Now in this example, we could remove the states out of the configuration mapping and determine how to best distribute any settings that were applied at that level. We would end up with the three site collections, one for offices, one for DCs, and one for stores. Device groups would still be configured and assigned to devices in the same manner as the previous example. I'm going to go over an additional mapping concept here. Uh, so looking back at the earlier global hierarchy example, we remember that we had to cut one of the levels in AOS8 hierarchy to make it fit into New Central's config model. And again, deciding which model to eliminate, which node to eliminate requires careful consideration of where settings were applied and how they are inherited. A lot of us are familiar with this diagram that I meant, like briefly showed earlier at the beginning of the presentation. And then you should have an idea now how that could map. Before I even click on anything, hopefully you have an idea of how some of that configuration can map from the left to the right. So in this example, managed network maps to MD and OWL maps directly to the OWL box on the right. The global regions map to the top level. The countries to the second level, sites to the next level, and finally controllers to the bottom gray level. So if we take this diagram, the first thing we do is kill the global regions, and then the MD and MM nodes at the top. And now we're ready to see how this applies to the new central hierarchy model. So on the left, you can see the scopes from the new central configuration window. And that's it. This is one example. This is one way to map AOS8 to AOS10 with new central. And I already explained how the library at the top, that's not pictured here on the left, is a repository for all the different profiles that can be applied at these levels, for all the shared profiles that can be applied at this level. And the device groups can be compared to, also not shown here, device groups can be compared to AP groups in AOS6 and 8 for that matter. The last thing I'll leave you with here on this for the mapping or for this hierarchy is just a quick, I'm actually gonna escape out of this for a second to show you this. As I was trying to find a way to map this, I came across this particular method. Just a trick or tip for everyone is this is what PowerPoint calls smart art. So if I go to insert smart art hierarchy, this one here, it's going to come up look like this. But if you notice here on the left, you can apply your nodes the way they are in AOS8 and then indent them to nest them within each of these levels. And then what you can end up with is something like this, right? I played with the colors to make it look like this. But if you notice, I click on this here, and on the left, you see all of these. So if in San Salvador, it has 3 controllers in the cluster, you can just add a third one, and you can see that now it just automatically adds it here. And I show this because when I was trying to take that configuration, right, or that tree, the AOS8 tree style, and find a way to create a diagram so I could present to a customer, it took me a long time to do it manually, like the ones that I was showing you earlier. And this to me was a quick way to just get started and present it. So hopefully this helps you. So yeah, I jumped off just to show you this here. Um, this this slide deck will be available. It's already available for Discover partners, and we have a partner facing page that I'll share the link. I'll share it with John. I totally forgot to grab that link, but I will make sure that I send it over to John. John, you can share this out, or just ask your channel SC if you can get access to it.
Yep. Okay.
I'm gonna get back in. Config discovery. This is something that was a pain trying to gather information for me from AOS 6 to 8, but then also that when I started doing AOS 8 optimization projects where customers wanted me to come in, take a look at their existing configuration and find ways to improve, resolve some of the issues that we're seeing and just optimize it overall. And thankfully, all of all of those banging my head against the table trying to figure all that stuff out now comes into handy again. And I'm going to share this information with you here. So when preparing for AOS 8, sorry, for AOS 10 migration, the key, I'm going to start with this slide here. The key areas to focus on for your discovery effort, right? Architecture, on the topics of architecture, network, and hardware, start with your config hierarchy, how your AOS 8 environment is structured, and where settings are inherited, and the rest of the settings here, right? Capture your AP groups, VAP profiles, etc. On the network side, gather all your wireless and wired network details, um, radius information. And on the hardware side, inventory your hardware. You need your MAC addresses, serial numbers, and other information for onboarding your devices into Central. And then also the specific configuration for your gateways, for your controllers that you're about to convert into a gateway. So I'm going to quickly review how AOS 8 profiles map into New Central UI, into the New Central UI library page. On the left, this is a familiar AOS 8 profile stack. Things like AP groups, RF and WLAN profiles. This one, I found a diagraphic like this years ago, and I found it really helpful in understanding how the profiles map within each other without having to go manually searching, doing Control F on show command outputs. On the right, these are clearly organized into various cards, such as wireless, VLAN and networks, security, etc. And now we'll connect the dots. And I'm not going to talk through the connections here, but hopefully this is going to serve to you as a cheat sheet or reference. Uh, Once it fully populates, I'll leave it for a second if you want to take a screenshot of it. I Again, you're going to get a copy of this, but I always hear, when I'm in presentations, I hear, oh, we get a copy of it. I'm going to take a screenshot anyways. And so hopefully this helps. So you can reference it later. And then now I'm going to go through a more detailed breakdown of some of the most useful AOS 8 CLI commands for config discovery. The first one in this context is going to be show config node hierarchy, which helps give you a quick summary of the groups, manage devices and their paths. This is I'm going to go into detail in the next slides about each of these. Um, Show AP database long gives you your serial number and MAC address for every AP. Show AP LODP neighbor is not, you don't need it to deploy to migrate anybody. You don't need it for a deployment. But again, sharing with you the things that I've started to do in my deployments because I got bitten in the middle of other deployments is this one. Show AP LDP neighbor because let's say you're doing a site that has 100, 500 APs. And when you apply this, some of these APs won't come back up, right? Once in a while, you see some like one or two, three APs that won't come back up, and you can't find them. So now, where are those APs? Which ones are those? Now you got to sit there, stare, and compare between sheets to see which are the APs that are missing. That's number one. That's a time-consuming task in itself. Now, let's say you have that information, but now you want to go find it. So you want to track the MAC address. Okay, first you got to get the MAC. Like if you want, the way I would do it is I go to the ARP cache, right, at the layer three, at the default gateway. Look at the ARP cache, find the MAC address, and then do show MAC address table commands uh, from the top level, from the core down to wherever I could find it, right? Finding it through the uplinks, etc. The thing there is, yeah, great. If you have access, great. But if you're doing a wireless deployment, specifically a wireless deployment project, people don't expect, sometimes a customer does not expect um, anybody to require access to the switches. So in the smaller or small mid-sized companies, you're going to get uh, customers that do everything, switches and wireless. So that's not a problem. But when you have the larger organizations that have dedicated wireless team, dedicated switching team, the wireless team sometimes doesn't even touch the switches at all. So they won't have access. Now they have to contact somebody in the weekend. And I'm telling you this because that's happened to me, is they had to contact the switching person on the weekend. And if this was a government customer where they don't answer their phones on the weekend, what are you going to do with this, right? So it became a pain. So again, this is why I think this one, the show AP, I always run it before starting any project, whether it's a upgrade, anything. Anytime I touch a WLAN, I would run a set of commands that I would collect baseline information. Again, this is one of them. The show AP LLDP neighbor, executing it at the controller level. So SSH into the controller or to the MM and then go to MD connect mode to that controller and then issue this show AP LLDP neighbors command. It's going to output a list of all of the APs, the switches that they're connected to, and the switch port that you could reference in the future. I would just run that command and proceed with my project, feeling comfortable, feeling, a little less stress, knowing that I have that to fall back on in case something happens. Inventory your MCs. So typically to get the MAC address and serial number of, or I would say traditionally, to get the MAC address and serial number from a controller, I would issue the show inventory command to each controller. Recently, I was talking to another TME, and we were both asking each other, "Do you know a way that we can pull this both serial number and MAC address from of all the controllers from the MM?" And it turns out that this one gave me that information for my lab, and it worked for a couple of other places. But I've heard of one instance where this show open flow controller switches, issuing it on the MM did not provide all of them. But for example, if you've been doing AOS8 and you know about the show switches command, right? Running a show switches command at the MM level, it's going to give you the list of all of your controllers that are being managed by that MM. In If you run this show openflow dash controller switches, it's going to give you the serial number and MAC address of all of them. That from my experience. But again, somebody messaged me, said that they didn't. So I'm giving you the heads up. Give it a try and see if this works for you. Um, from what I've seen, the majority of times it has, but I would also compare it. Do a show switches and the show open flow controller switches and see just to verify that you get them. But this is a quick way to gather instead of having to go individually to all these controllers, right? You have a large enterprise or, that has, you know, dozens or hundreds of sites. Uh, this is one way that you can gather all that information a lot more quickly, and It'll become useful when I demo this config parsing tool that at the end of this presentation, and then the obvious show running configuration, right? Collect all the information for that specific site. The last one that on here is the show config effective detail, show configuration effective detail, and then entering the site's path, the node's path. So you can do a MD slash and the rest of that path, or just do the host name for the controller. So we say, for example, show configuration effective detail controller one. If that was the host name. It would give you, it would output the configuration on one side and then the source of the configuration on the other side. And it's all separated by a pound symbol that I've used. And I'll show you in a second how I've used it to quickly separate that information and identify where the configuration came from. It it made it a lot simpler. Show configuration committed right below that, and then the path similarly will give you just the specific information for that node. So if I want to say show configuration committed MD forward slash USA forward slash Chicago, hit enter, I would see all the configuration that was the VLAN or anything specific that I applied that was applied at that level. And this will help you with customers who have um, may have inherited this network, right? I've had customers that like, hey, I've only been here for a year. I did not deploy this. I wasn't part of it. I know how to maintain it, but I can't tell you specifically where everything was applied. Where I've had customers that it's been around for a long time, so they would forget um, where they applied the configuration. So relying on that and then having that bite you later, it could be, that introduces even more delays, right? That we're trying to avoid in a project like this that has so many moving parts. So so again, this one here, the show configuration committed, effective detail, and the show configuration diff will help you compare sites or compare or identify where the config comes from, and then present that to the customer and say, Mr. Customer, is this correct? Right? Is this what you want me to move over? Is this how you want me to apply it? Or this is why we can't apply it like this, right? If they have too many levels in the hierarchy, like I was saying, right? This is where we have to consolidate. So these will give you that information. All right. So again, for the hierarchy, just a quick visual of the same thing that I was just talking about here is you can gather the information via the MCRs, the mobility conductor, via CLI or UI. So on the left CLI and the right UI, uh, the show config no hierarchy is the example. In this example, we'll display the hierarchy using the forward slashes to separate levels. This helps you visualize your existing hierarchy to plan for new central's configuration model. And then these boxes just give you a visual of how they map between CLI and UI in this example. Show AP database long is the fastest way that I was able to gather the MAC and serial numbers for all the customers' APs. This is the information you'll need for onboarding your APs into Central. And you could issue this command at the mobility conductor level, and it will give you every AP that it knows of in this database. And if you issue it at the controller level, it'll give you all the APs that are tunneled to that particular controller. So you can do either or. And then that's the information highlighted there in those columns is what you're going to need to collect. Typically, I would put this into a spreadsheet and then play with the delimiters like text to column function to separate those. But it could become a time consuming. This is something that you would prepare for, right? You will allot time for this. Show AP LDP neighbors, as I was explaining earlier. Right. So running that show AP LDP neighbor on the controllers prior to the upgrade, it's essentially a COIA command, right? To help you later on in case you need it. And this will work as long as either you're running Aruba switches or any other switches that are running standard protocols. Um, if you're running switches like Cisco that by default do not have LODP enabled, you could issue a LODP run command. And I've had that where I had to talk to the customer, and sometimes they had to get approval from their switching side or get approval for change control reasons before they issue that command to enable LDP, right? Other customers will just, sure, no problem, just issue the command and we're fine. So making sure that LDP is running in order for that to give you that information. And then this is an example of the show open flow controller switches I was telling you about earlier. And these are the MAC address and serial numbers on the left and right. For you run this one on the mobility conductor level. Okay. Issuing that one, like I said, I would issue this along with show switches and compare and make sure that they're both there. And if for whatever reason, right, you don't get the information that you want from that show command, then you can just go individually to each controller and issue the show inventory. Show configuration effective detail and the node path, the other one, the last one I was talking about. Um, you see here on the left is the configuration. On the right, it's telling you where it was inherited from, and then the pound symbol. So this is how I was mentioning that I would show you an example of how I would do this. So I would take that show configuration effective detail output, the entire output, copy that, and then paste it into one column in Excel. I would follow steps in here, follow steps 2 through 6 in the screenshot and leverage the pound sign as the delimiter, similar to using like the way that you would do a CSV file, but changing the delimiter from a comma to check the box for other, uncheck the comma box, check the other box, and then enter the pound symbol. This will help you separate the configuration between the two. And then I would highlight this, the way I would see this, the way I would use this, I would then I'll filter. Let me show you here. So once it's separated, and then they're in two separate columns, I would issue a Command T on my Mac or Control T on Windows to convert it to a table. As a table, then I would go to the upper right here and then filter. It would list me all the common rows. And then I would say, I want to look at what's in Chicago. I would just check the box for Chicago. And then all I would see is what was applied at the Chicago level. So it's similar to the show. I would compare it to the show configuration committed output, right? You would get the same information. You don't have to do all of this. If you just want to know what's in Chicago, you can just issue that command. However, if you're trying to understand where everything's coming from for the different sites for the customer, then this is one way that will help you quickly gather that information. And then this is just a quick animated uh, mapping cheat sheet, I would say, of the configuration. On the left is a table that's in the VSG, and it's listed in the order of how you would need it in Central. And on the right, it's where you're going to get it from in the controller, and you would see the commands there. So that's why it's crisscrossing, because I've organized it on the left in a way that's going to help you in the next platform. And on the right, you're going to be getting it from different places. And then this is part two of that table. You in the commands on the left show inventory, show APE, SSID, show running config. I will use the show running config pipe begin AAA authentication server to start me where I need to see the radius servers that I'll need for that AP group. I mean for the server group. Now, this is a discovery tool that I mentioned earlier, and I'll show the link in a second here. Before I switch to that discovery tool and hopefully haven't put you guys to sleep, there's just a few more slides. Bear with me, and then I'm going to jump into the tool. So this is just to give a visual of all the stuff that we just talked about, right? So you log your CLI outputs in a typical workflow. I would log the CLI outputs, whether it's myself or I would send an email with the list of show commands to my customer prior to the kickoff meeting, so I can already and they can send me those outputs for back to me, and then I would work on those outputs and put them in a spreadsheet, presentation, etc. So I can get the ball rolling, get the project started. So after logging all the CLI outputs, I would analyze the hierarchy, collect all the configuration settings for the sites that we were planning to upgrade in that project, inventory the APs and controllers, my serial numbers, MAC addresses, etc. collect the AP group information. Once I have the AP group information, I could then trace down the all of the referenced VAPs and other profiles that are needed under the AP group. And then I would map the configuration for each one of those SSID profiles for the different VAPs as they're applied. Because in an AP group, you're going to have multiple VAPs, and then this is something that you would have to repeat, right? So then trace the AAA radius chain, document your ACLs and roles, and then depending on how many, let's say you have a customer that has 4 WLANs, 4 VAPs, you would repeat the same red steps over and over again until those are done. And that can become pretty time consuming, but it's worth it because it's going to save you time in the long run because you're not guessing. It's giving you the actual raw information. So now the commands that I would use to gather all of that information are these 3 commands. So AP database long, show run on the controller, and then show config node hierarchy. So this tool that we created has those 3 functions, as well as we've integrated this this switch inspector functionality for switches that I'll touch on as well. The idea here is to keep it as simple as possible, no API, right? As a network engineer for over 20 years, I've done CLI. There's been CLI guy, and majority of engineers, I would argue, are still CLI guys, and then the or gals, right? And then now the when I was first talked about APIs, I said, yes, I need to learn this. And then I got busy and I kept pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off. And then people started telling me, oh, that configuration is only that capability is only available via API. And I would say, okay. And then I wouldn't ask questions because I didn't want to sound like I didn't know anything about that. But it's intimidating, right? At first, I'm like, oh, I don't have time. And right, I think a lot of engineers are still like that. So because of that, this is all CLI show command output based. That way, you can just use the traditional techniques that we already know, um, issuing these show commands, logging them, saving those outputs, and passing them around, sharing them with the team as needed for projects, um, and then just pasting them in here. Okay, so we take those workflows, those 4 show commands in this example, we take that, and the outputs are going to be the AP and controller serial number and MAC address. It's already going to be outputted in a CSV format that's already formatted for GLP to upload it. So there's no need to go and reformat this. Like I was saying, that I would use a spreadsheet to paste. I've done, let's say you do a school district, 2,000 APs, right? Issuing that show AP database command, and you get 1,879 APs in that list. Copying that, pasting it into a spreadsheet, using that CSV trick that I was showing you, changing the delimiters, playing with it to be able to relatively quickly, still become a pain, and to get the AP serial numbers and MAC addresses, right? That becomes a little time consuming in itself. So there's that, right? WLAN, the second one will output your WLAN and other configuration in human readable format, which I'll show you in a second here. The third one is your AOS8 hierarchy. It gives it to you in a very rough, in a rough diagram. Again, this tool wasn't made. It's not an official tool per se, but it's something that we created to help us with a lot of these POCs, things that we wanted to do internally. And then as we shared it with the team, we got the approval to make it available for our partners. So there's a lot of information that's coming for it. So hopefully this will become helpful. I see this being as a huge time saver. I can see this saving me in a project, like a 2,000 AP project. I see all these functions here saving me anywhere from a couple of days to over a week of data gathering, formatting, verifying, etc. So this is the third one. This hierarchy that I was talking about is really just a visual. It's not going to output anything yet that's usable in the platform. This tool is not a conversion tool, migration tool. It's strictly a discovery tool. So you could just look at it as kind of why I called it validate, because it's going to give you just the ability to validate against your CLI configuration, right? So it gives you a way to just get started. I'll show you in a second. I'll stop rambling. And then the last one is the spreadsheet. The output for the switch inspector is a spreadsheet of the switch profiles um, that you issue the show run command for the switch inspector. It's going to give you a spreadsheet with the switch profiles and the API calls for all the match settings, and it's going to give you a second file that's text, just a simple plain text file that has all the config lines that did not get picked up and mapped to the AOS 10 or to the new central profiles. So this is the video that I presented over at Discover, but I'm going to show you instead. I'm going to do it live here. So again, so you would go, let me paste this. Can I paste this in the chat, John? I should be able to.
Yes, you should be able to.
Let's
See if
see.
it'll drop it in there.
Okay. So this link here will take you to Edge for Partners. As you can see here, the URL is efp.theedge. So if you are an authorized partner, you can log in with your credentials and get access to this. So we've made it so you check this box, read your terms and conditions. This is basically just telling you you're on your own. This is to help you get started. This is not a replacement for an engineer. So if you have, you know, if you have PMs that I have PMs that decided they wanted to make some changes because they used to be an engineer before, right? Tell them don't this is not going to make you an engineer again, please. Um, I love my PMs. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying I've had some fun with them. So check this box to accept that. There's also an FAQ here that gives you answers some of the questions that you may have. So check the box, continue. And then these are the 4 workflows. And it's pretty, like I said, try to make it as straightforward as I could. So device inventory. I'm going to take the show AP database. Here's a sample inventory. I scrubbed fake MAC addresses and whatnot for demo purposes. I can paste that here. This is the show command. As you can see right here, it tells you paste the show AP database long output here. Make sure it's the show AP database long, not show AP database, right? The show AP database will give you similar information, but it won't include the serial numbers, I believe. So make sure it's the show AP database long. Now on the bottom box, which is also optional, is that show open flow controller switches command I was telling you about. If you have that information, you can paste them both in here, parse it, and now you have this table, which is your serial number and MAC addresses, right? And then the link at the top and the bottom of the table. You export this file. And as you can see, I've downloaded 55 times testing this thing. So you export that file, and then the output is going to be not in numbers, but it's going to come up as a CSV file. You're familiar, hopefully is familiar with the CSV, or try it yourself, right? Paste that in there, dump it. This information is not being collected. It's all displayed live. It gets processed in the backend on our servers, but it's not being gathered at all. It's just made. I mentioned this because this question came up before. Customers concerned about that, or SEs concerned for their partners, which is a great question. And it's not. It is just being processed and displayed for you live. So when you hit export, it's exporting what's on this page. It's not exporting from some backend database. So to me, again, this will help eliminate some human error, all the copy pasting that I would do, missing something, and also help me. It would help. I see how this would help me be more consistent, much more quickly, get started much more quickly in a project, be able to do this consistently for my customers. And if you're like a technical leader for your partner organization and you're managing a bunch of partner engineers, this again will help you show them how to use this and help them get started so you don't have to go back and clean up something that somebody missed. Right? I've had to come in and work on projects that to resolve a couple of hiccups that were introduced by, by engineers that were, copy pasting, and maybe I explained it too fast and became an issue. So again, this will help you just do this more consistently. For the MC config workflow, I'm going to take the show run output. Oh, and also there's also instructions in under each one of these workflows. When you click on that paste window, parsing window, you'll see this click for instructions button below. It is going to walk you through, but again, it's pretty straightforward. Once you paste that configuration, click parse config. Up here, it's going to give you the information for the appliance. So this is the information that when I wipe the controller and upgrade it to a gateway, this is the information that I need to configure that appliance, right? Uh, if you're going to run the wizard, the startup wizard through the console, then this is the information that you're going to need from that for that. Or if you're going to do it in the UI or API, however you prefer. But again, this is the specific appliance information for that show run output that you just issued, that you just pasted in here. And then, right, the way I see this, the way that I would see this working is uh, talking to the customer and understanding which are the AP groups that have their production SSIDs. A lot of customers have it all. They have one SSID that has, one AP group that has all of their WLANs. Others have different WLANs and different AP groups. So they'll tell you well, use the Office HD. This example, use this one and this one. So then I'm going to start with, let's say, Office Standard. When I click on Office Standard, it's going to give me the AP system profile. If it's not listed, it's like in a typical CLI output, when you do a issue a show command and one of the profiles isn't listed or a setting isn't listed, it's because it's using the default, right? So when you see it not listed, I would assume that it's a default and then verify it in the raw show output. Uh, Now under radio profiles, you would see the radio profile name that's mapped to this particular AP group, which to me is a huge time saver in itself because having to go into the CLI and map these and tie them all together was a pain. So radio profiles for each one, the EIRP min and max, if it's not listed, again, default. If it's listed, it's not default, and then you want to record this information, right? And decide and have the conversation with the customer if the environment requires it. Right? Air match has been great with AOS 8 and I see that it's going to work. I trust that it's going to work just the same. And I say I trust that it's going to work the same only because I have not done it, but everybody that I heard of, no complaints on that. AirMatch has been really good at managing the RF. But if you need to control it, and if you have a very unique environment, like everything's great, in a general automated sense, until you have a very, very unique environment that requires certain tuning, then you want to understand what settings were applied there so you can carry them over into the new platform. Regulatory domain profile, this information isn't really used. You might have to use it, but typically it's by default, it will assign the country code automatically based on based on the site location. So in New Central, when you create a site, you have to give it an address or a GPS coordinates in order for it to know where it is. And then there's the option is already, like I said, by default, it will apply the country code based on that geographic location. Below that are the virtual APs. So these are your VAP profiles that you would see listed under the AP group. And it's giving it to you again in a human readable format. It gives you the name of the SSID profile so you can go and verify this against your CLI output. Gives you the SSID, the op mode, and based on the op mode, it will, if it's a .1x configuration, it's going to look for radius servers, and then it's going to look for the group. This is the radius server group, and then it's going to give you the radius server host name, IP address, and if you have it in if you've run the if you issued the encrypt disable command prior to doing the show run output, then it's going to give you the information in clear text, right? Some of the secret keys in clear text, and then you could see it here. Uh, Transmit rates, if you've modified them, they'll be listed here as a min and max. If you haven't modified them, it'll be default, then it will just show as not listed. Your same thing for 5 gigahertz. The VLAN, it's going to extract the VLAN from your profile, right? That gets assigned, the default VLAN that gets assigned to that SSID. If it's a VLAN ID, it'll display it. If it's a VLAN name, I couldn't get it to work soon enough. I just gave up, and it was I was trying to have it so it would display the VLAN name and the VLAN ID next to it. So if it's a VLAN name, it's going to just tell you to go look for the VLAN name in the CLI output because it's not listed. Again, this tool gives you some of the most commonly this required information, but advanced things is not going to give you mesh profiles. It's not going to give you anything like that. But again, to help you get started, I think this is pretty helpful. For the AAA profile, it gives you the initial roles. For the roles, and here, if you're using the initial role, you can collapse that, and you can expand that and see uh, the policies applied to that role. And it's going to do the same going down the line. As you see here, let me look at. Here's the pre-share key, and then you see the pre-share key there. Here is let's see. Here's another one where it actually has multiple radius servers in the group. And then on your guest WLAN, it'll give you some of the information, right? Your splash page information, server group, things that are relevant to that WLAN. And then here's a list of roles. So if you have the voice role, you could expand these here. I started to flag them. That the request was asked, can you identify the roles that the customer doesn't need? Well, starting to flag them, I had issues with I came to the quick realization that when I flagged them because they weren't referenced in anywhere else in the config, that they were still needed because ClearPass was sending back a role. So in order for the controller to honor ClearPass's response and apply a role to for the user for that client device, it needs to know that role configuration, which will likely not be listed. It will not be referenced in any other configuration elsewhere. So I took out that flag and then just here are all the roles, and then you just have to have that discussion with your customer. At least you can provide them the list of roles and then use these outputs, right? Use this expand these to see what's being applied, and then determine how you're going to transfer this information over to New Central. The other thing to note, like I mentioned earlier, that this is just processed in the back end and then displayed here. We don't keep any of this. This is another one where if I output this, I can output it as a plain text file, and then use it for, again, to share with the customer, whatever you're going to do. If I output it right now, that text file for the roles, it's going to just show me the role names, and it's plain text. It's not going to allow me to do anything. So, but if I want, so then I have to expand these, just like the CSV file output that will export whatever's on your page. This is the same thing. Now, if I export it again, now it's going to export the information beneath that role. So it's something for you to know, just to be aware of, so it doesn't trip you up. And then on the switch inspector, the same thing. Here you paste the configuration, And unfortunately, right now I don't have I can't find the switch show run output that I can paste in here, but it's going to be the same thing. I paste this in here and then click inspect and download, and it's going to, yes, he's going to ask me to provide something. I'm gonna paste something that's not going to be relevant unless let me see. No. Okay. So I'll just paste one of these for just for the heck of it. None of it's going to match. But when you paste it and inspect, you get a zip file. That zip file is going to have those two, the spreadsheet and the text file that will list you all of that. There is and you have the instructions here on what you can get. So that's it for the tool demo. And I think we have a few minutes left for questions.
Okay, sounds good. Um, for those of you that weren't on as a panelist, just raise your hand if you got a question and I'll get to you. Hmm, I'm seeing no questions yet. We'll see. Well, that's good. Then everybody shouldn't have any problem with their migration. So, um, so this was a first session, and we're thinking about working on a part two of this, maybe a little bit more advanced. You're going to probably get a questionnaire that's going to be sent out if you attended, and then you can give us some ideas of what you're looking for. So, Andrew, you got a question?
Oh yeah, you said you were gonna post something in chat for the partner link to, I guess maybe the
Yes, I pasted it, but I'm guessing it's not you
Well,
guys didn't
it's
see
not
it
coming up because
because they're not a panelist. I think it's that chat
the
is for the panelists.
the panelist. So what
Okay.
I'm going to do is I've got everybody's email address. I'm just going to send that link out to everybody. I'll send it out later today.
Let me see if I can. Let me try one thing here because I see somebody. I'm sorry. See, I think Andrew, I think you asked that question right on the in the Q&A section. So let me type the answer there, and then hopefully everybody can see it.
And then, Victor, what was your question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to know if there was any particular limitations currently with the way currently the new central is today that, can prevent us from doing anything that we're doing in AOS 8 in terms of, transition to that architecture.
Oh yeah, there's today in this moment. Yeah, there are things that it to me there's it's all manual, right? Right now we have the element-based configuration. We haven't gotten to the um to having a similar something comparable to the wizard
Okay.
in AOS8. So when in AOS8 you go to configure a WLAN, you
Yep.
ask questions, and then boom, right? All your profiles are created automatically. In AOS 10, you have to still create the profiles, and that's coming soon. In the next few months. I really can't wait to try it myself, but because right now it's been all manual, right? But what I say is I encourage that from that side, from that perspective. I prefer to be able to do this manually first, because then when you have the wizard create these for you automatically, right? Now you know what it's actually doing. You can go back and reference those.
Indeed. Indeed.
But as far as differences, there are release notes of on things that you have to consider, right? Migrating. I don't. I can't say that it's. I really can't. I don't have uh, an up-to-date answer, right? To say
Yeah.
that it's got everything mapped one to one. I would say that it's not. It's probably not yet one to one today, but the things that are not mapped, we just did, as an example, I just did a couple of POCs for a couple of high-end customers. Well, I oversaw a couple of POCs, and in watching the configuration, by the end of the POC, everything was configured. There were no issues, there were no showstoppers, and we're talking, um, actually, it was a lot more advanced configuration than I would have normally done for my typical customers.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
Okay, Miguel, we got a couple questions in the chat that came up. Can you see them or do you want me to read them to you?
I'm trying to see.
I can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead. And there was
Uh,
somebody that raised their hand.
yes. So in the case, to see if I understood this right, so in the case of migrating the whole cluster to central, that's where you presented that controller needs to be running on AOS 8.10 or 12 or 8.12.01 or later. But is the procedure different if I only gonna be moving, like I have a customer that wants is, I mean, they have thousands of APs and we cannot replace all of them at once. So we're gonna start with certain locations. So I'm gonna be moving some of those APs, I mean, some of those locations to central and some other locations will stay under controller conversion 8. So so prior of moving the APs on these locations to central, I'm gonna have to upgrade the controllers. So the APs also upgrade to this 8.10 version or 8.12 in case they are not on any of those. Before those APs can talk to central, is that the case? Or because I'm not moving the controller and all the APs, the procedure is different?
Yeah, if you're not moving the controllers and you're moving just the APs,
Yes.
I believe there's a process. I can't say specifically there's a process um, where you can move the APs and they'll land in central and won't need the gateway right away, right? But then that would be a lot more disruptive because those APs are going to end up in central and not yet broadcasting anything. So what I've seen done is in projects like this is you would have an interim controller,
An
but
in, uh, an interim controller, that's what
yeah.
you
So
said?
you're saying that you're moving them over. So you're saying are you moving them over to be AP only
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then convert them all? You want to convert them to original?
So the goal will be to not have gateways anymore, right? Everything just APs and central. So, but gradually,
Oh,
location by location.
yeah. Then you can move them to central.
Yeah.
Like
But
it should.
is there
Okay.
a requirement of the version for the APs to be also on a certain version? That I have to upgrade the controllers where the APs are currently connected to,
The
or
requirement,
doesn't?
yeah, the requirement is in the sense, I would think yes, because the requirement is in the sense that the command exists. If you have a much older version of code, that you won't have the commands to upgrade it, right? Available, depending on the level of code. And there have been other reasons why WLAN TME recommended for these to be the ones. And then this is where I referenced it from this is the information that we reference from WLAN TME's AOS 10 user guide that's
Okay.
published, right? So in there, you'll have more details on that. I can't remember specifically all of the reasons why,
Okay.
but you'll have that information there.
And where do you say? I'm sorry.
I can paste it here. Let me see.
Sure.
Give me 1 second here. Migrating to AOS 10. I'm gonna paste that one.
Yeah, I was
And
trying to avoid not to touch the current production controller since I'm not migrating the controllers, just the APs. But
yeah, so take a look. I pasted it into.
sure, I got it.
Got it? Okay. It might not be seen by everyone though if they're not all panelists. So just I'm not sure how I can do that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Miguel.
yeah.
Yep.
Miguel, if you could send me those two links and I'll just make sure everybody gets them. And then there's three other questions in the chat. And
Can you tell me which ones you're referring to here?
there's one that is asking, is
Is
the
it from Mike?
Pardon me?
Mike, that one, is the exported content then imported into where? That one?
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
question.
Okay, so that one is exported to your local machine. So when you hit export, it just
Brings
moves
it.
it to your
Okay.
to the download folder.
Okay. And then the question below, when will configuration mode be enabled on for all customers to use in New Central?
The the communication has been by the end of this year.
Okay.
Uh, I haven't heard of that changing. That's what was communicated at Discover, unless somebody on the call can tell me otherwise. But I'm still going by that.
I think that's what I heard too. So I
Yep.
think you're close on that. And then the next question is, if our customer has only instance, well, an
Yep.
in
Yeah, the IAP deployment.
yeah,
Yep. So if our customer has IAP deployment, how can the migration tool help? Unfortunately, this migration tool is specifically for tunnel mode to campus mode. It won't pull it. Um, I wanted to create that, but there's a lot of migration content that we're trying to get out to you all um, by the time that this goes GA. So uh, I haven't been able to work on that. So unfortunately, right now it's all for um, specifically for campus mode for the
oh,
tool. But we do the VSG does have guides. Um, does have explain like planning guides for that as well. Uh, and I think campus migrate. Sorry, one second here. On the campus migrate page, I pasted. I found that there's an option to send it to everyone, and hopefully that gets everybody. So I'm pasting them now to everyone.
okay.
Uh, okay, so now I'm seeing if a customer is using Central Classic and isn't ready to update to New Central, can this workflow be used and split between Classic and New? Or does the customer need to update everything to New Central? No, so in order to update, so let's say if a customer's in Classic and they want to start partially and move a couple of sites into New Central, you still can upgrade. You would have to just create a new group because one of the requirements in the link I just pasted for in the my campus migrate. There's one of the guides is called New Central Readiness that will walk you through what you need to do to create a central group that is ready for New Central. I hope that answers that question. Well, at least
Yes,
partially.
thank you.
Okay, good, good. No problem.
Any other questions?
Really?
I'm taking those other links that you had, Miguel, and sending them to everybody. So, but I am also going to put a Miguel, if you can just copy those into an email and send them to me so I have them, because as soon as I shut this down, I'm not going to be able to access the chat. It's not something that team or Zoom does like Teams does. So, and
Okay.
get an email out to everybody, even the I'm going to send everything out to everybody, even who registered. It'll also include the link of the recording. So,
Okay. And then I see one question that was in the Q&A from Matt uh, saying he just got out of Matt saying, I just got out of HPE training where we were told that we should stop separating everything with VLANs and use a flat network instead. Yes. So you can put different types of clients um into the same VLAN, and then like for example, a guest client, and if you're fine with it, right? Because you could then leverage your user roles. Absolutely, all of that works. My point on that, and I thank you, but I need to clarify that more when I'm talking, is that you can still do that part, but just make sure that when somebody's doing that, you don't include the APs in the same VLAN as the clients. So the reason there is that now with with the way that it has been built, is that because now these APs can support bridge mode, tunnel mode, without converting from IAP to campus mode, right? Because of that, and other reasons that are beyond me, is you cannot allow you have to prevent the AP from finding out its wired MAC address through the WLAN. Oh, it's WLAN, it's wired in like it's wired MAC through the wired interface. And that can happen when you have the AP talking to clients on the same VLAN at, via Wi-Fi as it's talking to the infrastructure on the wired side. And it's just to prevent broadcast storms. That's the biggest reason. But you can definitely still place your devices. Yes, we are still, if you look at the VSG, we still talk about that. Is that you can, let's say, place, we're just getting ready to update that as well on the some of the deploy guides, is that you can place, let's say you have a single trusted VLAN, and then you can put your employees and contractors or your students and staff all on the same VLAN, and then leverage your user roles, which are super powerful. As I was doing more and more, but traditionally customers use VLANs. Over time, I started seeing more customers uh, relying on traffic segmentation via user roles. And it's awesome because then you could have, if you're leveraging ClearPass or any other NAC solution, right, you could have it query your identity provider, right, whatever your identity store is, and then see if marketing, if this person is part of marketing, gets this particular role versus Miguel, who's in IT, gets this particular role. And then both of those can be on the same VLAN and have completely different levels of access. So absolutely you can do that. Just don't put the APs in the same VLAN. As your tunneled clients, this is not an issue if you're using uh, bridged mode. So if you're all, like, let's say all sites without, like you said, sorry, who was it? Ronald. I think, yeah, Ronald, you were saying that you're trying to go away from controllers and gateways to just AP only. So if you're going AP only, then that's not a consideration. Only applies to uh, tunnel mode clients. I hope that helps.
Okay. Well, we're a little bit over. I think this was a good session. Um, I will be sending out an email, probably by the end of the day or first thing in the morning, depending after I get the recording straightened out and the other links from Miguel, and we'll go from there. So thank you everybody for attending, and hopefully we'll put another session together.
Thank you, everyone. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Miguel. Very good job. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
yep. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.